Housing markets in Australia have experienced their first drop in prices since the beginning of the pandemic. Data from PropTrack's Home Price Index has found price growth either flatlined or fell last month. House prices faltered 0.11%. For many homes, prices have fallen for the first time since 2020. In Canberra, prices are down for the first time in 3 years. Joining us live now is the Executive Chairman of Yellow Brick Road Home Loans, Mark Bouris, for more on this. Mark, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So these price drops, I should say, is this the start of it?
It is the start of it, and it's pretty obvious that if you're going to be able to borrow a lot less money to be able to make your purchase, then you're going to be able to pay a lot less to make your purchase, which means house prices must come down.
The drops that we've seen so far, though, according to REA Group, is that work with your predictions and your measurements?
Totally does. So from our point of view, there's two new things that determine how much someone can borrow, therefore how much someone can pay. And the two new things are, obviously, we calculate on a higher interest rate, so we make assumption of much higher interest rate, which means you can borrow less, because unless your income's increased, that's the first thing. And the second thing is a new one, is that we won't lend now more than 7.5 times your income. So it's just another barrier. So if you're earning $100,000 a year after all your expenses, we're not going to lend you more than $750,000. So it's an additional barrier to borrowers, which basically sort of puts a cap on the amount of money people can borrow, which puts a cap on the amount of money people can spend. And if interest rates go, by the way, if interest rates go up by 1.5%, which by the end of this calendar year, which everybody's predicting, they've only gone up 0.35 so far, then you would expect these prices to come back even further. Yeah,
I mean, the expectation is that it's going to be 0.4. Many economists say 0.4 the next time the RBA meets. Is that what you're looking at?
Well, I've been reading some commentators, some highly respected commentators, saying 0.5%. And this will be the first time we've seen a 0.5% increase in any one round for nearly 20 years. And if that happens, we're going to see people being able to borrow around $50,000 less for an average borrower, which basically means, or the big prediction now is, from across the board, on average, house prices will reduce by 10%. We've just seen a 0.29% reduction. Imagine that as a 10% reduction in house prices on average across the board over the next 12 months. So
when you say that banks will only lend 7.5 times the salary, if there's an increase of 0.5, I mean, I'm assuming here that'll contract even further.
100%. So they won't contract the 7.5 times, but they'll the increase of the interest rate makes it harder to borrow more money or borrow the same amount of money, because we assess your expenses as being much higher, because we assess you on a higher interest rate. And don't forget, we add 3% or to whatever the prevailing interest rate is, 3%. So we're going to be doing assessments around 6% per annum.
All seems like doom and gloom, Mark. Where's the positivity here?
Well, it's great. It's great for people who want to get into the investor market. So investors are seeing fantastic returns at the moment because we've got very low vacancy rates, because less people can afford to borrow money, so they are renting. So that's one. So from an investment point of view, that's very good. Places like Adelaide and Perth are still doing, and Brisbane are still doing very well. Regional areas are doing very well because people are saying, hang on, I can't afford to buy in Sydney, so I'm going to go and buy in Ballina, or I'm going to go and buy in some other place, in the region. So regional areas are doing well. People slide down the scale, so those places where they're sliding down to, they are doing better. When we say prices are falling, we are talking about national averages. Generally speaking, that's in Metro Sydney and Melbourne, to a lesser extent Canberra and Hobart, but generally speaking, we are not talking about everywhere in Australia, because we're talking about averages, and averages can be quite deceiving.
Mark, it's interesting as always. Good to have you with us, and we'll continue to watch it closely in the coming weeks and months. Thanks, Mark. Talk to you soon.